everyone. Thank you for joining us. Happy Friday. A couple housekeeping things before we get started on our session about the state of patient choice. This session will be recorded. It's recorded and it will be sent out to you via email in the next coming days. And feel free to put any questions that you have during the session in the chat. We'll be answering them as we go along in the chat. I'm Tara Tate. I'm the Solutions Marketing Manager at Raider 8, and I'll just be guiding this conversation today. The person who's really built this research from the ground up is Emily Manuel, our Marketing Communications Manager. This is her third time conducting all of this research on the state of patient choice, and she sees every single response. She analyzes those responses and just specializes in research and best practices for healthcare reputation management. So, Emily, thank you so much for presenting this info to us. Before we get into the actual numbers, can you tell us why the survey exists and what gap it fills?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tara. I'm so excited to chat with you guys today about this. So yeah, at a high level, just to level set with everybody, the reason we built this survey is pretty simple. We were noticing as a marketing team that most of patient behavior research was coming from one to three places, either from advisory firms that were surveying their own clients, perhaps software platforms, surveying their own users, or just general consumer studies that were lumping healthcare in with mechanics and restaurants and retail. And none of these surveys really were asking patients how they're finding and choosing their providers. And that was the gap that we were setting out to fill with these surveys.
Okay, can you tell me about this is the third edition of the survey. Can you tell me about the evolution? What changes have you seen over the three editions so far?
Yeah, for sure. I think, each time we've done the survey and conducted it, it's definitely gotten more interesting. Each year, the data has moved in the same direction, though, I would say. It would be more digital, more selective, and more decisive. And those trends this year became thresholds. So you can see that journey on this slide where we show in early 2025, 84% of patients were checking online reviews before choosing their new provider. Then, when we surveyed again in mid 2025, we found that 31% of patients used AI to research their providers. And now, taking us to 2026, we're finding that 75% of patients are saying they will not book with a provider rated below 4 stars. So that bar of standards keeps on rising.
Okay, so let's dive into the 2026 numbers then. The report subtitle is the 4-star floor. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so with the 4 star threshold that we have, it means that there's this distinct line in the sand that patients will not cross, right? So 75% of them told us that they will not book a provider below 4 stars, and 44% of those folks draw that line even higher at 4.5 stars. And we found that only 11% of our respondents said that the star rating doesn't matter to them and it doesn't affect their decision. But what we're finding, from these studies, these surveys that we're putting out, is that this 4 star floor creates a cliff effect, right? So, a patient that, or a practice, excuse me, that's sitting at 3.8 stars, isn't just losing to their better rated competitors, they're being filtered out completely before they're even considered as a choice.
Okay, that's interesting. So on that 44% number really sticks out to me because that's almost half of patients that are just not going to book. If even at that higher threshold, even at 4.3 stars, they might not book. That is really, really an intense threshold. Can you show me what that actually looks like in a search?
Yeah, definitely. So on our next slide here, we gathered an example of a real Google search that someone could, do today. So, for example, say a parent is typing in best pediatrician near Denver, and if you guys can see at the top, there's that filter that says top rated. That's a default for a lot of the patients who are searching today, and it's how results are getting framed for them. And as you can see from the short list that it provides here, we're seeing 4.9s, we're seeing 5.0s, and practices that are sitting at basically a perfect rating. So if you're a practice that's sitting at a 3.8 or even perhaps a 4.2, you aren't even making this list at all. The patient never even scrolls or compares or dives in a little deeper. They never know that you exist, that you're basically invisible. And that's kind of what we're talking about as like the overarching statement of this report is that it's no longer to be, you know, you can no longer be just a 4.2 and say that that's good. You have to have kind of that top tier number, and it's making the difference between showing up and then becoming invisible.
Okay. And is this threshold specific to healthcare or is it happening everywhere?
Yeah. So something else I wanted to dig into is seeing, we know that patients are selective with the choice that they're making for their care, but how does that stack up against, retail or plumbers or mechanics? And what I found from a Bright Local survey from 2026 is that patients are holding doctors to a higher standard than anyone else. So, from this cross industry survey, they found that 68% of consumers will not consider a business below 4 point stars. And from our survey, we found that 75% will consider. So, there's that 7 point gap between retail and a provider. And when you look at the 4.5 threshold, that gap widens a bit with 31% for all businesses versus 44 for healthcare. So there's that 13 point gap. Just showing us that patients are pickier about their doctor as they should be, and that's where they draw the line in the sand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, choosing a doctor is definitely higher stakes.
Mhm.
Are patients actually acting on this threshold though, or are they just saying that they would and their behavior is something different?
Yeah, so as we were building out this survey, we wanted to get a little bit deeper and see, yeah, they have these standards. They want to see those high numbers and ratings, but are they actually acting on it? And when the survey results came back, we found that indeed they are. We found that 55% of patients have either canceled or avoided booking appointments completely with a provider because of what they've seen online. So that's a little bit different than what we saw 9 months ago, and that number was sitting at 40%. So we have that 15 point jump in just under a year. Um, and what's driving those decisions isn't necessarily clinical. A lot of the deal breakers that we're finding that they've flagged include root staff at 52%. Maybe the doctor didn't listen to them, long wait times, or billing issues. So, what we're finding is the reputation that you're seeing online isn't just a vanity metric or a marketing number. It really reflects how the practice is running on the inside.
Yeah, and I mean some of these things I'm seeing are pretty operational and they're pretty fixable, it looks like. I'm curious, what did these thousand or th so patients say was their number one influence on their choice of which provider they go see?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the top, we were seeing when we first conducted the survey that mid last year AI kind of entered the fold. And I was curious to see what is actually influencing these patients to choose and select their providers, right? So when we asked them what sources most influence their final choice in booking, we found that AI tools came in first at 36%, with Google search results coming in at just 34, followed by doctor referrals at 32%. So we're seeing that AI didn't just enter the conversation, it's actually leading the charge. And among those patients who actually switched providers, AI's influence was even higher at 39%.
Okay, it's pretty crazy to see AI at the top of this list.
Mhm.
I do have to be a little skeptical though, because I feel like we're hearing about AI this, AI that, just AI everywhere. Uh, the numbers that we're actually looking at here, it's 36, 34, and 32. That's not a huge difference. Is this, AI being 36%, that number one influence, is that indicative of just a huge shift, or are we reading too much into that 2 percentage point gap?
Yeah, I think you're totally valid in pushing back on that and kind of wondering what that really means. And I do think 2 points doesn't seem like a huge shift. But I will say that that point is telling a story here, right? That, like I said earlier, AI wasn't really part of the equation in patients' decisions not too long ago. And now it's integrated in every piece of our lives, it feels like, right? Like everywhere you turn, you're seeing AI this, AI that. So I'm thinking from here, we're only going to see that number rise and rise as we conduct these surveys.
Yeah. So how many patients are using AI tools to search for providers at this point?
Yeah, so jumping off of what we asked, finding the providers, what tools do you use? We want to look at that adoption rate, right? To see if they're actually, integrating with these tools that are at their disposal. And we found that 47% of patients are now using AI to research a provider, which is up 31% from last year. So for those keeping track at SCORE, that's a 16-point jump in just 9 months. And something that I wanted to flag that I do in the report and here with people on the call today is that patients aren't always necessarily choosing AI. I think we can all speak to that, where sometimes you're looking things up on your phone or you're using an app and you find that AI is kind of feeding you that information for you without you asking for it. I found in a Bright Edge survey that 89% of Google searches with a healthcare keyword now trigger an AI overview. So, like I said, these AI responses and results are placed in front of patients when they're going to look for the care that they're interested in. And now, you know, that's kind of the new landscape that we're all getting accustomed to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like every time I search, I see an AI overview. And for anybody on the webinar, Google announced a couple weeks ago, I think 2, 3 weeks ago, that they're fundamentally changing their search bar for the first time in 25 years.
Mhm.
So they are pushing AI first in search, right?
Right. For
Right. So I know you've got an example here of what an AI search or AI powered search actually looks like. Um, this is completely different than the one that we looked at earlier, right? It's showing a summary of top cardiologists in the Tampa area.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think to piggyback off your comment about Google kind of changing how search is going to be conducted, I think it's indicative of how it's here to stay and it's not just a fleeting trend. Like AI is going to be part of uh, the search that we've all kind of grown accustomed to, but just adding an extra layer to it. So I wanted to provide an example for everyone on the call here to show what patients are actually seeing if they're searching for a cardiologist in Tampa. They search for a provider, and before they see those blue links or the map that I showed earlier, the AI will generate an answer for them, giving them some top rated options. And it's summarizing what the patients are looking for, right? Are they board certified? Do patients like them? Do they have good bedside manners? Um, I think something I want to flag here is that it's pulling from the same reviews and listings that you're already managing for your practice and providers. And again, like we noted earlier, that if a patient sees this, they might not even scroll beyond this section because it's kind of giving them everything that they already need.
Yeah. Well, 47% of patients are actively doing this. Who is this 47%? Is this a Gen Z thing? And should practices that have an older patient population not really worry about this trend? Should they take different action based on this report?
Yeah, so as I was, drafting this report, I wanted to really get granular with it just because AI is still in its infancy and we're still kind of learning all the kinks and what's going on. So I wanted to know out of all these age groups, who's actually using it, who's getting the most from it. And what we found is the age group that's leading the AI charge isn't necessarily the youngest. We found that 45 to 60-year-olds are sitting at 64%, while adults that are aged 18 to 29 came in at just 28%. And as I thought about it a little bit more, I thought that actually kind of makes sense. That 45 to 60 age group, they're that sandwich generation. They're managing a lot of different healthcare decisions, right? They're making decisions for themselves, maybe for their aging parents, for their kids. So they have a lot at stake and they have a lot going on in their lives, so they want to make sure that they're using every tool at their disposal. So I feel like to answer your question, this isn't something that only practices with younger patients need to think about. If anything, I would say it's probably the opposite.
Okay. That's really interesting. And it makes a lot of sense because like you said, they're probably doing the most just healthcare searches in general. And I also wonder that age group being a core part of the workforce in many workplaces, there's a big push to use AI. So I wonder if they're just more comfortable with the idea of using AI in their personal life as well. So we know that patients are using AI. We know that they're trusting AI, but should they be trusting AI? I think myself, many people on this webinar have experienced a really crazy inaccurate response from an AI tool. What did this report find out about accuracy?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, again, it's good to be skeptical and to flag things like that because, again, AI is such a new tool in our lives. I think um, it's imperative to be a good steward of like digital tools and digital health in general. But I wanted to find out if people in 2026 are actually trusting what they're seeing. So we found in the report that 43% of patients say that they trust AI more than they did a year ago, which I found interesting. And 55% now rate AI results as equal or better to just a traditional Google search. Um, so I find those numbers really, really fascinating. And, beyond that, 465 patients who have actually used AI to research providers, 66% of them told us that they run into incorrect information, that hallucination stuff that we've all heard about. So that could range from wrong addresses, wrong phone numbers, insurance information isn't correct. Maybe they are saying they're open on 4th of July when they're really not. Um, so, I feel like yes, that number, that 66% is a dramatic number, but I will say after running into those errors, patients still say that they trust the AI summary anyway at 60%. So I think that patients are knowing that AI is getting things incorrect sometimes, but they still use it anyway. And that's why I feel like managing what AI says about your practice isn't necessarily an optional thing anymore because it's going to be placed in front of these patients. They're going to use it. So you might as well make sure that everything looks up to snuff.
Yeah, I mean, and without that, without kind of controlling that narrative, who knows what AI is saying about a practice?
Sure.
Uh, this makes me curious about the question of trust.
Mhm.
And I know that this report shows some findings about what makes patients trust a provider or practice online. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So this is the one that really got me excited because when we see such a big shift, I feel like that is where, we get to the good stuff. So the single biggest shift that we saw from this report is that 66% of patients now say seeing a provider respond to reviews shapes their trust in them, right? So 9 months ago, that number was hovering at just 42%. So we're looking at a 24-point jump, which is the largest one that we've seen throughout the duration of this report. So it's showing us that patients aren't necessarily just reading the reviews from their peers and kind of taking that all in. They're actually reading, okay, what is the provider saying in response? What is the practice doing to fix this? A negative review that is answered with care and consideration and professionalism often goes a lot longer, than just seeing a bunch of 5-star reviews that could, potentially be, um, something that doesn't show what is the practice doing to make things better and improve. So I would say also to keep in mind that answering these reviews is great for patients and your current patient base, prospective patient base, but remember that these AI tools are scraping and reading these responses too. So when someone asks ChatGPT about a provider, the answer that tool is scraping is public, and it's showing if this provider or practice is engaged and committed to making sure that patients feel heard.
Okay. So patients want to hear from practices then. Are
Mhm.
patients themselves more willing to leave reviews or do they just want to read reviews?
Yeah. So what we found, another interesting standout from, comparing last year's report to today, we found that they're actually more willing than ever to leave reviews. And I feel like that's great news for everyone on the call here today, that participation gap is closing. So in 2025, we asked patients and they said 56% of them rarely or never leave a review. So this year we found that that number went down to 42%. And now we also found that patients are 23% likely to leave a review after every visit, which is up from the last time we surveyed, which was 16%. So, you know, most importantly from this, we found that 68% of patients said they'd be likely to leave a review if their doctor asked them to, and only 12% said that they would not. So it's definitely those numbers are something that we like to see, like that people actually want to sing your praises.
Yeah, people want to leave reviews. You just ask, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of really, really good data here today. If someone's watching this and they're thinking, okay, a lot of numbers to work with, but what do I do? Where do I start? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so we definitely covered a lot of numbers today, a lot of stats, a lot of information overload, but I do want everyone on the call to just take these little nuggets away, after we're done here, and just know that that 4-star threshold is real. So if you're sitting below that, 75% of patients aren't even considering you, they're not even seeing you, you are, pretty much invisible. So I would also say what's moving the needle is also those complaints that we flagged earlier. So staff, wait times, communication, and billing, those are the top things that we were seeing that patients are, really, talking about in their reviews. Um, and another thing that is important to keep top of mind is that AI is here to stay. It's not a fleeting trend, and it's already shaping who patients are choosing, right? So it's the number one cited source, and it's pulling from the same review and listing data that you're already managing right now. So I want everyone to think of your online reputation as, the usual, but also marry that with the AI reputation that has come into the fold. So they're just both working together to make sure that you look, um, consistent online at every touch point. Another thing I want people to remember is that these review responses actually matter and they're the most powerful thing that you can control. So, when you think about healthcare, there's a lot of things that are out of your control or your reach, whether it's uh, things that happen at the front desk or someone had a bad day and took it out on a review. I feel like that 24-point jump proves that patients are paying attention, whether you engage with them or not. And AI is also reading those responses too. So, it's a twofold situation there. And I want to say that lastly, patients want to participate and they want to sing your praises, right? So make sure that you're asking every single patient to leave a review. 68% of them would if their doctor asked them to. So I feel like that's the most uh, tangible thing that you can grasp onto and help with your online reputation.
Very good takeaways. Love it, Emily. Thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing all of this great data. Everything that Emily walked through today and more is in the full 2026 Patient Choice Report. You can download that report by going to raterate.com/2026 Patient Choice Report. And if you want to see how your practice stacks up against any of these benchmarks that we talked about today, the Raterate team can run a complimentary reputation audit for you. Just go to raterate.com, hit schedule a demo, and we will get everything customized to your practice. And last, if you have any questions, whether it pops up later or whether we didn't get to it in the chat here, ask us, right? Email us. We'd love to hear from you. info@raterate.com. Once again, this session will be emailed to you afterwards, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your Friday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.